Tumblr. It is hard to describe. I'm just going to show the official About page from the website because I think it does a pretty good job at conveying the humor and uniqueness of it. It is kind of like a blog, but shorter and more visual, and kind of like a social media platform, but less structured and less focused on algorithms and follower counts. I recommend that you at least check it out if you haven't already because it still exists in a big way. There are over 600 million blogs on it with millions of posts being added to it each day. However, it has been a difficult 10 plus years for Tumblr, and I think almost anyone would agree that it has declined significantly. In fact, for years now, I've been reading comments from viewers on this channel requesting that I make this video. Right here, the quickest, most straightforward evidence of a decline that I can provide is the fact that Tumblr was acquired for over $1 billion in 2013. Then, in 2019, it was acquired for what seems to be less than $3 million, losing over 97% of its value within a 6-year span. In this video, I want to talk about how Tumblr became so significant before outlining what I believe to be 3 of the biggest reasons behind its decline. The main person responsible for starting Tumblr is David Karp, who, believe it or not, created the website when he was 21 years old after he already had about a decade of experience in the tech industry. Yeah, when he was 11 years old in 1997, he learned to make websites by reading a book called HTML for Dummies and quickly started making them for local businesses. As a teenager, he started working for a friend of his mom's who had a production company who worked with the Cartoon Network. He went on to work for a website called urbanbaby.com where he became chief technology officer at 17 years old. By 2006, he had acquired equity in that company, so when it was sold to CNET, he took his portion of the money and invested it into his own company called Davidville that would focus mostly on consulting and making websites for businesses. Maybe you remember that this was at a time when blogging had become really popular, and microblogging, or tumblelogging as it's sometimes called, was in its very early stages without any significant platforms that were built around it. The distinction there is that blogging tends to be long form, more polished, and ideal for people who are really good at writing, whereas microblogging is typically shorter and more casual, and I would say overall easier and more accessible. David Karp is a perfect example of someone who wanted to express his various thoughts to everybody on the internet, but felt that he himself was not a great writer, so the popular blogging sites like Blogger and WordPress were not ideal for him. He was much more attracted to microblogging, but since it was still such a new concept and he didn't really have anywhere to do it, he and his one employee took it upon themselves to create their own website for it. They had 2 weeks open between projects, they had a vision for it, so instead of going on vacation or something like that, they used that time to create Tumblr. At first, it was much more of a personal side project, but as it started to gain momentum, it became their full focus. Aside from being one of the first microblogging websites, I think a lot of Tumblr's early success can be attributed to the fact that it was so simple. The original tagline was "Blogging Made Easy," and the homepage defined tumblelogging as blogs with less fuss and more stuff. I mean, Tumblr allowed you to post photos, videos, links, all sorts of media with customizable themes that came together to create a visual experience that was also easy to share. Tumblr made it possible to re-blog something before Twitter added its retweet feature. By 2013, Tumblr had become one of the most popular sites on the internet, surpassing the 100 million blog milestone that year. It was a significant tool in the Occupy Wall Street movement. President Obama was utilizing it as part of his re-election campaign, and some of the biggest celebrities were praising it, like Lady Gaga and Taylor Swift. Now, switching over to the decline of Tumblr, there are a lot of factors to consider here, so it is difficult to isolate a peak year for the company. Please let me know what you think it would be, but I would say that it would be around 2013 or maybe a little bit later. And one of the biggest reasons behind it would be the fact that Tumblr has not been profitable. To my knowledge, it has never made any money, and you can understand how it's hard to keep a business running for so long like that. Ironically, that free-spirited, sometimes rebellious attitude of David Karp that has impacted the culture of the website is the same thing that has made it difficult to monetize it. Early on, Tumblr was kept alive by multiple rounds of funding. Initially, David Karp Karp sold 25% of the company for $750,000, giving it a $3 million valuation in the first year. The final round of funding valued the company at $800 million. These were people willing to invest their money because they believed in the concept. They knew that it wasn't making money at the time, but figured that it would start pulling in the profits after it established a strong user base. And by far, the most common, most effective way to make money on networking sites like this is through advertisements. But unlike most other networking sites, David Karp has been particularly opposed to it. In 2010, he said that the thought of it turns their stomachs. In 2013, he said that using something like Google AdSense would be a last resort. And he would repeatedly say that the company could easily be profitable if they chose to show ads, and quite honestly, it seems like that might have been necessary. In 2012, it was maybe overdue when Tumblr finally started showing ads on a particular section of the dashboard called Radar, and then about a year later they started showing mobile ads, though still on a relatively small scale. Then, when they were bought by Yahoo for over $1 billion, everyone was nervous that they were going to start flooding the site with ads, given that they were one of the biggest digital advertising companies out there at the time. And they did go on to integrate more ads into the website, but it's not as straightforward as you might think. For one, a lot of people on Tumblr are anonymous. They're not required to provide personal information, so that makes it difficult for potential advertisers to target their ads to the appropriate people. On another layer, Tumblr has been known to have a lot of adult-oriented content on there that a lot of advertisers don't necessarily want to be associated with. And yet another complicating factor was the fact that Yahoo itself was losing market share when it came to digital advertising. I'm just going to guess that Tumblr would be doing much better today if it had been bought by Google or Facebook. Those were potential companies that they were seeking, and that is going to lead me to the next reason on my list: changing leadership. When Yahoo bought Tumblr, most people were understandably apprehensive about it, partially because that was a lot of money to spend on a concept that had yet to be profitable. Tumblr was unproven, so it was questionable if the deal would ever pay off. Another part of it was the fact that Yahoo was in a questionable state, with a long history of wasting money on acquisitions, paying billions of dollars for companies that almost went nowhere after being acquired. I actually made a video about the decline of Yahoo if you want to hear more detail about what was happening on that end of the story, but in short, they had recently made a ton of money by selling their stake in Alibaba, and their CEO at the time was looking to pull the company in a new direction by using that money for a major acquisition. Some of the potential targets were Hulu and Netflix, which she later admitted would have been better decisions, but at the time she was very confident that Tumblr would be a game changer for Yahoo. She compared the deal to when Google bought YouTube and promised not to screw it up. You see where this is going. Unfortunately, I think they may have screwed it up. They never found a great way to incorporate ads into the site, and probably failed to give it the attention that it needed, given that Yahoo was dealing with a lot of its own issues outside of that. In 2015, Yahoo wrote down the value of Tumblr by $230 million, essentially admitting that the company had paid too much for it, and the following year, they recorded a much larger impairment cost connected to it. In 2017, Yahoo was sold to Verizon, meaning that Verizon became the new owner of Tumblr, a company that they didn't even seem to really want. It just sort of came along with the deal. Later that year, David Karp left the company, and obviously a big deal since he had been the driving force behind it from the beginning, and then as if that wasn't enough craziness, in 2019, Tumblr was bought by Automatic, the company behind the blogging platform WordPress. There were technically 4 different owners within a span of 6 years, and looking back at the situation, I am not so sure that any of them were doing what they needed to do to make it a profitable, sustainable business. Finally, the decline of Tumblr can also be attributed to either the presence, or I guess more likely the absence, of adult content. Compared to my other 2 reasons, this one is far more public and controversial, so I'm going to guess that this is the one that you were expecting to see on the list, and rightfully so. See, Tumblr has always promoted the fact that it is about freedom and self-expression, an attitude that made it an attractive place to post that sort of content. David Karp has said he has no moral opposition to it, he doesn't want to moderate it, and that Tumblr is actually a great platform for it. It became a big part of their site, which, as I said, complicated things with potential advertisers and led to a few different issues. I hope you can understand why I don't want to go too deep into all of this, but in 2018, Tumblr was taken down from Apple's App Store for what ultimately turned out to be illegal images involving children that made their way through Tumblr's filters. Shortly after, they made an announcement that all adult content content would be banned from the site, a decision that was not popular with most of their users. It obviously went against their principles of freedom and expression. Their system was flagging content as being inappropriate when it was in fact following the rules, and overall people were mad. I understand that a lot of the people watching this might support their decision, but objectively it did cause a dramatic drop in traffic, reported to be as much as 30% in the months following the decision. So again, it follows Tumblr's pattern of doing something that is good for growing its user base, though maybe not the best financially, and then when they make a change to try to make things better financially, it is unpopular with the user base. You can argue that maybe the concept and the spirit of Tumblr is impractical from a business standpoint, or if it is practical, Tumblr has not done a great job in finding the right balance that allows it to be profitable. But still, it's hard to say how things are going to play out in the future. Changes continue to happen with it becoming more integrated with WordPress behind the scenes, and I guess most of their new viewers are coming from the next generation. So even though Tumblr isn't nearly as valuable or as promising or as relevant as it used to be, it is still hanging in there with a dedicated yet seemingly different user base. Let me know in the comments, have you ever tried that shoelace thing? Like, there's supposed to be the secret code between Tumblr users where you compliment someone's shoelaces and then they respond by saying that they stole them from the president. Just trust me, it's a whole thing, and I would love to hear from anybody who has actually experienced that in real life. But more importantly, how do you feel about Tumblr, and how has your opinion of it changed over the years? Would you describe it as delightfully peculiar, or simply something that you don't want to be a part of? Many other networking sites have surpassed it in popularity, with the more traditional follower counts and algorithms that do a better job at making people stand out and creating influencers. So I guess I'm asking, is Tumblr better because it's different, or is it worse because of it? And any other thoughts you have about Tumblr, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.